Winter, are you on?
I am here,
Oh, perfect.
but it says I can't start my video because the host stopped it.
All right, while you're working on the video, let me make some introductory comments. Senator Faith Winter is known as a champion for families and the environment. She graduated from the University of the Redlands with a degree in environmental management and soon became a political organizer. There you are. She started with Enviro Citizen, moved on to the White House Project, and then to Emerge Colorado, which helps elect women candidates. Then she took her own advice and she ran for office. Sounds familiar. That led to her election in first of all, to a seat on the Westminster City Council. And that led her to election in 2014 as a state representative. And in 2018, she was elected to the state Senate, representing parts of Westminster, Thornton, and North Glen. Currently, Senator Winter is chair of the Senate Transportation and Energy Committee, as well as a member of the Finance Committee. Most notably, she sponsored the Family Medical Leave Bill that failed in the legislature in 2020. But undaunted, she spearheaded the family leave ballot measure that passed by a large majority later that year. And that's what we are centering our discussion around for today. Faith lives with her husband, Mark, and their two children, Tobin and Sienna. Please welcome with me my friend and former colleague, Senator Faith Winters.
Yay, hi everyone. Thank you so much, Betty, for that introduction. And I just want to thank you, and I want to thank Sue Ryden and Nancy Todd and all of the wonderful women that are involved in AAUW, because I really believe that, you know, we've seen women in politics that pull up the ladder behind them, and then we see women in politics that lift as they rise and intentionally mentor and help people and help other women be successful. And I will say that Sue and Betty and Nancy were all fantastic mentors to me, and I wouldn't be here without your support and mentorship. So thank you. I'm very excited to be with you all today and talk about women in the workforce and what we're doing in the legislature and how to get more involved. And then of course, leave plenty of time for questions because you can ask me anything that you want. And I'm excited that there's other legislators on, and in the chat, I do want to just say that Representative Quita Ricks has also joined us. So hello, Representative Ricks, happy to have you here. I want to talk just a little bit about where we are in terms of the state of women in the workforce, but then I want to do some interactive activities and hear from you a little bit. So get ready to be putting things in the chat because I want to lift up your voices. So over the pandemic, during COVID, 1.8 million women have dropped out of the workforce, which is an incredible amount. And given where we were for job creation before the pandemic, there's actually 2.5 million women that aren't in the workforce now. And there's a whole lot of reasons for that. And I think we as a country, as a legislature, keep talking about Build Back Better. And I don't know if we're centering enough, though, the experience that women have gone through and what's happening in the workforce and what that means. Some economists are predicting that we're going to set gender equity in the workforce back by nearly a decade because of women dropping out of the workforce right now. We are at the lowest level of participation for women in the workforce over the last 30 years. One example, just in September 2020, in 1 month, 863,000 women dropped out of the workforce compared to just 168,000 men dropping out of the workforce. And there's a lot of contributing factors to this. One, we know that the service industry was hit far harder than any other industry out there, which service workers tend to be women. They tend to be BIPOC women. They tend to be lower income women. And that forced a lot of women out of the workforce. Also, we know that childcare became inordinately difficult during the pandemic. As a mom of 2 children that were remote learning, as I was trying to do legislative work and my other job, I have other jobs as well because being a senator doesn't actually pay for my childcare and my mortgage. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. The remote learning and the work, and I have a support network too, and it was still the hardest thing I've ever done. So you saw women dropping out because most of the childcare was going towards them. The entire childcare system was flipped upside down during the pandemic. In fact, we lost 4.5 million childcare slots during the pandemic, and we don't know how to fill them back up. Just as almost every single industry across the country, we have a workforce shortage, right? These are low-income jobs. They're not fantastic jobs. You're putting yourself at risk for COVID. And so we lost $4.5 million childcare slots, and we don't know how to build them back. So even if you have the resources, the amount of money to, again, have the support of childcare in order to re-enter the workforce, chances are the slot might not be there for you. And the flexibility of childcare is getting increasingly difficult. When we talk about women dropping out of the workforce, that obviously has an impact on women because we know part of the pay gap that exists is when women aren't consistently working and then they re-enter the workforce at their past salary level. And now we've done a lot of work in Colorado to correct for that, and we're working on that, but it's still a persistent piece. When we also look at women in the workforce, that means that you're taking time off and not contributing to your retirement, a savings account, a college savings account. And so it's permanently setting women back in ways that isn't great for our economy. And so when we look at women dropping out of the workforce, it's bad for an individual woman, but it's also bad for the economy. In fact, women dropping out of the workforce right now is estimated to have a $64.5 billion in lost wages and economic activity. And so when we talk about building back better, we need to talk about how are we building back infrastructure in a way that supports all workers, right? It supports low-income workers, BIPOC folks, LGBTQ folks, and women to make sure that we're part of the workforce. And then of course, the wage gap is still persistent and still exists. We're at 82 cents on the dollar. April 2nd is going to be equal pay day again, but that's on average for all women. For moms, they're making 70 cents to the dollar that a white man makes. For Black women, it's 63 cents. For Native American women and Indigenous women, it's 60 cents. And for Latina women, it's 57 cents. So we have a long way to go to actually create a workforce that creates an economy that we all want to see, and I know you want to see. And it's really going to take some deep structural systemic change in order to do that. And on top of that, we also know that debt has a huge place within our economy, and women are likely to hold more debt. And in fact, more student loan debt, 58% of student loan debt is attributed to women versus men. And just a year after graduating, women on average carry 9.6% more debt than their male counterparts. And so when you add the pay gap together, lack of childcare, lack of flexible scheduling, lack of health care, attacks on reproductive health, and things like paid sick leave and paid family leave not being accessible, really women are facing an uphill battle in being full members of the economy, full members of the workforce, and full members of society. And so what I want to take a moment to do is think about what we could have, right? Think about what we could do in order to fully participate in the workforce, fully participate in society, and live our hopes and dreams. And so what I'm hoping that you can do, and there's 136 participants online, I want you to take a minute and fill out this sentence, and I want to put it into the chat. And then once you have your answer, I want you to put it in the chat, and I'm going to share these examples. So my vision for women in the workforce looks like. So I shared that over the last year, there was times I was in back-to-back Zoom meetings being a legislator. My contract work, which actually pays my bills, because we were shutting down trainings, I wasn't being paid to do trainings as often as I was. I wasn't paid to be doing nonprofit consulting. And because the legislature was on and off in a non-consistent way, I was losing contract work. I was losing income. Both my children were at home doing remote learning. My son did okay. My daughter hated it, and it was a daily struggle, daily fights. She was falling behind. I was getting a lot of messages from the teachers on how I needed to be more present with her and help her more. So we were trying to legislate a response to the pandemic. I was trying to maintain my other sources of income. I was helping my children with remote learning, and try and take care of my own mental health at once. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm sure many of you experienced something similar. I don't want that to ever happen again. So I have an idea of what my vision for women in the workforce looks like, but I want you to I'm gonna just give you a minute of silence to reflect on it, and then please start putting in the chat what that looks like for you. Your vision for women in the workforce looks like. All right, so everyone keep putting your ideas in. I'm just gonna highlight some of these because this is what gives me hope and inspiration that when we talk about building back better, we're gonna do it in a way that is inclusive and intersectional. And so I'm just gonna talk about some of these ideas that are coming through, right? So that there's equality, free childcare, that at least half of positions at all levels, including leadership and the highest levels of leadership, are women. I like this one, that white women are opening doors for women of color and BIPOC folks. Equal pay for equal work and respect for women in places of leadership, affordable childcare and equal pay, every opportunity is available, women in leadership, women in color, SBAs and SBDC resources, yes, more resources, equal chance at advancement. We know that's a huge barrier. Workplaces that value mental health for their employees. We know that mental health has been the third wave of the pandemic, and having workplaces that support that and treat that as other healthcare is really important. Support for childcare options, both public and private, at a reasonable cost. Good training, education, women mentoring other women. I think the best thing we can do is lift as we rise and help each other out. Preschool offered in places of employment, opportunities for university positions and part-time positions, more flexible work schedules, women as managers, so female workers are free from sexual harassment. Yes, please, a flexible support system. And so these are all fantastic ideas, and I want you to reflect on these and look in the chat and think about, if we had the world that we could create, what would that do? And what could we do to get there? And that's truly how you get involved in the legislative process. So when you come down and talk to us, Now, I listed a whole bunch of statistics in the beginning just to give an idea of where we are at for women in leadership and women in the workforce. And I bet none of you remember any of the numbers that I listed off. However, I bet when I talked about being in Zoom meetings all day and the teachers calling me about my daughter and how I needed to offer more support to her and I fighting every day while she was doing remote learning at home, I bet many of you pictured me as a mom in this office on my Zoom trying to manage that. And it's because the number one way that we work and pass legislation is through storytelling. Because what happens when you tell your story is that you come to the table with your experiences and your values. And then I, the legislator, or the other 99 legislators in the building, come with their experiences and their values. Now, maybe we're talking to a legislator that doesn't believe that the pay cap is that persistent and thinks it's just because women choose, right, lower income jobs. And so listing off the sense that I listed off isn't going to motivate that person. But talking about your experience and how you don't get to save as much for retirement, or you aren't contributing as much to our economy and what that means to your bottom line, what it means to the groceries you buy, they can't argue with your lived experience. But also it bonds them to you and connects with you. And so I want you all to think for a minute of what is one story that you could tell coming into the legislature about your lived experience as a woman or non-binary person, to say, this is what happened, this is my lived experience, here's why this issue is important to me, right? And so it's a fairly simple formula, and I'm going to put that in the chat as well, right? This, I call it going from the me to the we. So this is my story, and this is why X issue is important to me. So I know that you had your legislative briefing about bills that are coming up, and a lot of those bills are my bills, and I'm so excited and I look forward to working with you. So whether it's the issue of power and ending harassment in the workplace, or it's ending period and diaper poverty because we're eliminating the sales tax. I know that there's a bill likely coming to make sure that there's more fair scheduling. There's bills coming to make childcare more affordable. There's bills coming to support domestic violence. Talk about having a hard time making it to work on time and showing up and being productive when you're in a domestic violence situation, right? And some of these stories can be really scary to share. So when you're talking about period poverty and not being able to afford menstrual and period products and hygiene products, if you're talking about reproductive health care and what it means to you, that can be really scary. So for example, this year, I know we have our Reproductive Health Equity Act coming, which is really important to us. And for me on a personal level, that is super impactful, because after I had my second child, I was told that should I get pregnant again, I would likely die. And telling that feels really scary. And I just told 136 people that on a webinar. I can't even see your faces. I can't even see your reactions, right? And I just said that out loud, and that feels really scary. And it's scary to tell your story. But I want you to know that when you tell your story and when you feel vulnerable, it actually shows up as strength. So me saying that story, me sharing that with 136 people right now, wasn't the most comfortable thing I did, but I bet most of you are like, wow, that was really brave that Sarah Winter just said that, right? And so when you share your story, it feels scary. So practice with each other, practice with your fellow AAUW members, practice telling your story, because telling your story, your vulnerability shows up as strength. And it's those stories that start to change hearts and minds. And it's those stories that eventually get us to 33, 18, and 1, which it takes to pass legislation, right? We need 33 House votes, 18 Senate votes, and 1 governor's signature. And so the number one thing I can emphasize is there's the logistics of reaching out to us, of calling us, of emailing us. There's the logistics of either coming down to the building or preparing to speak to committee. But ultimately, what I'm encouraging you to do is spend your time on is telling your story. Because when you look at all of those things that you wrote in about what types of workplaces you want, right? About fair retirement, being able to stay home ill without having to prepare for a day, right, for someone else, being able to take care of yourself, your mental health, collaboration between women, equal contributions at work, taking on gun safety issues. That all comes down to our lived experiences and how we collective organize together. And sharing your stories is how we create that change. And if you ever want to practice telling your story, feel free to give me a call or come to my office. I'm a very safe place to tell a lot of stories to and give feedback. So I really appreciate that. And this is going to be a big year for women in the workforce and non-binary folks and BIPOC folks and GLBTQ folks this session. And so it's an election year, but we're still doing big things. And so I know that we're looking at ways that we can do some more fair scheduling. I am bringing power back, which we are reestablishing the standard of severe or pervasive, because that standard was established in the 1960s. Our workplaces look very, very different. Having severe pervasive means that women who've been raped at work often don't have recourse in court because it wasn't pervasive enough, or daily text messages aren't severe enough. And so we really need to establish a standard that makes sure everyone shows up to work feeling safe. We know that there are people out there that can't afford period products, can't afford diapers. So looking forward to repealing the tax on that. We are doing a lot around domestic violence support. We know that domestic violence has spiked during the pandemic, and how do we fund that? So I am sure that everyone on this call, all 136 of you, are passionate about something, have a story to tell about something, and your voice is incredibly valuable at the Capitol. The other thing I really want to emphasize is any bill that you want to work on, don't feel like you can only talk to the person that actually represents you. Yes, it matters if you're my constituent and you live within the boundaries of my district. But if I'm carrying a bill, or Representative Froelich or Representative Ricks is carrying a bill that you really like, reach out to them, because politics is actually a team sport, and we're only as strong as the teams we build, and it takes everyone's involvement. And if you called me up and said, I really love this bill you're working on, how can I be useful? I might live in Aurora, I'd still gladly welcome you, right? Because I'm still, at the end of the day, a state senator. There's state representatives on this call. Our job is to represent the whole state. And I trust other representatives and senators to work really deep and do the deep dives on education policy. I do deep dives on workforce issues and environmental issues and climate issues, and that's part of the teams we build. So if there is an issue you care passionately about, call up that senator or representative that's a championing on it and join their team. So that's my suggestions on how to get involved, some of the things that we're doing, where we are at for women in the workforce, and what the Colorado legislature is doing. And then, of course, we really need to, try to light a fire under Congress to start solving some of these ideas, but we're going to do our best in Colorado until that day comes. And I want to thank AAUW, leadership of AAUW that's been longtime supporters and mentors of mine. I wouldn't be here without you. And with that, I would love to take any questions. And when I mean any question, you can talk to me about what it's like to be a woman running for office, to be a mom serving in office, about bills I'm working on. I'm an open book for you and look forward to all the questions you have.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Winter. Such great down-to-earth advice. It's just so refreshing to hear you speak. If you've been hearing people on national TV speak for the last 6 months. So thank you. I'm looking to see if we have questions. We have a lot of responses to your question. And I guess one question that I would ask that maybe some of the women in our audience are thinking about is, what qualifications are required to run for the state legislature?
Oh, that's a great question. I've recruited thousands of women all over the country to run for office. And people always ask, what do you look for in a good candidate? And there's two things I look for. And that's integrity and passion. Because I can't teach you how to be a good person. You're either going to show up and want to build power on behalf of your community or yourself, right? I can't teach you that. So you need to have integrity, believe in building power on behalf of your community, and you need to be passionate because it's a hard job. People yell at you. You have to ask strangers for money. You go door to door in a really vulnerable position. You're like, hi, I hope you hire me, right? Imagine how nervous you are for a job interview and you do that hundreds of times a day and you're like, hi, please hire me. So you have to be passionate to do that. But the thing about politics is we are a better democracy when we have a diversity of experiences, right? So whether you're a nurse, you've been a stay-at-home mom, you're an organizer, you're a professor, right? You're a grocery worker, you're a frontline worker, you're a postal worker. I don't have that lived experience. And when you come with your experience to a decision-making table, and we come with diverse backgrounds to a decision-making table, we're actually more likely to solve problems in a way that actually works. And so we would be very boring and not solve problems in the best way if we're all lawyers. And I love lawyers. We could use a few more lawyers elected actually right now in the legislature. But the academic qualifications should be different. They should be varied. The lived experience should be different and be varied. Just come with integrity and passion and you can learn the rest.
Thank you. Good advice. And we have a question from Darcy Judy. How much opposition do you expect to the RIA bill? Will it pass easily or not?
I know that there's a lot of people working very closely with that bill. I would say it's probably not going to pass easily because this is about women's autonomy and being able to control our own bodies, and LGBTQ folks and everyone else being able to have say over their own bodies. And so that's always going to be a fight. I think we have the political makeup in Colorado to make sure it passes, but there's some folks that are uneasy about it. Even some folks within my own party, and that's why being vulnerable and telling your story and telling folks why this matters to you and what it means to you and your family and the choices that you make. And so we'll work hard at it. I think it will pass, but we should take nothing for granted, and it's going to take work.
And here's a question from Carol Newstetter. How do you keep your positivity day to day in light of the recent years of more negative politics?
Well, so one of my very favorite mentors was Joan Fitzgerald, the first woman president of the Senate. And in fact, she's the reason I ran for office. So when I was 25, I would bring college students to the Capitol when she was president, and we'd lobby her on renewable energy issues and climate issues. And she was a rock star in my mind, and I was so impressed with her. And one day I said, you're really good at your job. How are you so good at your job? And she said, we're only as good as the teams we build, and we need better people to run for office, and you should run. And I was 25, and I was like, what? Me? And later on, she said once in a speech, she said, if you want unconditional love, get a dog, because if you are in politics and people are angry at you, then you're not doing your job, right? Because changing the status quo and changing systems is scary for people. So first of all, I have 3 amazing dogs. Queso comes to the Capitol with me a lot, so come say hi to Queso. 2, when I am being attacked, I know it's because I'm actually making a difference and stirring things up. So you have to at least try and take it as a compliment. And then surrounding yourself with people that love and support you, doing the really hard work and doing the really hard work together. And
Thank you.
Zumba. I do a lot of Zumba.
Good, good. Physical activity is important when you have a job where you don't get a lot. Gail Wilson wants to know, how do we get beyond the controlling factor of money in politics?
That's hard. There's a lot of policies that we can pass, but ultimately, unfortunately, campaigns take money, and we're using that money to get our message out there. And unfortunately, a lot of that money, especially on the soft side, so the soft side is money that I don't, as a candidate, control. It just comes into my race, whether I want it to or not, goes towards negative campaigning. And we're going to continue to see that as long as it continues to work on voters. So everyone says they hate negative campaigns, but then a new negative ad comes out and the polls change, right? And so I think we have to talk about voter education. And then also, you know, you need enough money to be competitive. You need enough money to get your message out there, but the amount of people power you have still very does much matter in politics, especially at the local level and the state legislative level. And so you don't have to be the candidate that raises the most money if you have the most volunteers and the most dedicated people going door to door and having that conversation, because having a one-on-one conversation, just like I talked about storytelling, is the #1 way to earn a vote. And when you have a dedicated volunteer that goes out and says, I love Faith, she is this badass mom and she works really hard for us and you need to vote for her, that's going to mean more than a mailer that they're going to look at for 7 seconds. And so people power still does matter, especially at the local level. So please volunteer on a campaign of your choice.
Thank you. Marcy Young would like to know if you could share a low point in your career that today you recognize the strength you gained from that experience.
Sure. So I actually was on the front page of the Denver Post for this low point. It was in 2019. So I worked on paid family and medical leave for a very long time. I ran it 6 times before we passed it at the ballot initiative. I called it losing forward every time. We had made some really painful changes to the policy based on the administration and what they needed to do to pass it. And it was changes that I didn't love. It was changes the coalition didn't want. And we had some co-sponsors leave, and it was really personally painful. And I was on the floor with all these amendments, and Alex Burness came up to me and said, so it seems like it's dead. And I said, yep, I have failed Colorado. And I burst into tears and I said, I have failed everyone in Colorado and I don't know what to do. And, you know, I was on the front page of the Post crying, saying I failed Colorado. And that was really hard because I'd poured my heart and soul into it for 6 years. But ultimately, when you stay connected to the policies, because you imagine the people that's actually impacting, and the mom that when we do have paid family leave in a few years is going to be able to be with her baby, and the daughter that's going to be able to take care of her mom who's going through chemotherapy, or the son that can take care of his dad who had hip surgery, and you remember those people, you build strength and you build resiliency and you get up again and you keep fighting and you keep working hard, even when you're on the front page of the Post saying that you failed Colorado in tears, and then you pass a ballot initiative.
Yes. Peggy Leach wants to know, thinking about your pandemic story, what legislation would have helped in your situation?
I mean, I think we have to talk about, in general, that's a big question. I think making workplaces more flexible for women, right, in general, to accommodate childcare. So granted, the pandemic was extreme with remote learning, and it's still hard. You know, in November, my daughter's school sent all the 5th graders home for 2 weeks unexpectedly. So all of a sudden overnight, I had to scramble for childcare. That's still happening. So how do we add flexibility into scheduling and workplaces? Because I can accomplish my job. It just might not be in the traditional 9 to 5 in an office setting, right? And I think that overall is really important. Now, clearly my experience was really unique given that I'm an elected official, and something I'm very passionate about is I think we need to pay our elected officials more money. We don't make enough money to be full-time. And that means we have, and I love all the retired people I work with. I love the lawyers I work with. But I talked about earlier how we need a diversity of experiences in the legislature, and that means diversity of backgrounds, ages, income. And it's very limiting. My dad lives with me. I have a supportive husband and a 2-income household, and it's hard for me to do. I would love a grocery store clerk to be a state senator, right? We talked a lot about frontline workers. We have 1 nurse in the Capitol right now. We have 1 doctor. And if we're going to continue to expect elected officials to basically from January to May, you're working 60 to 70 hours a week. You can't have another job. You should be working year round doing stakeholder work and constituent services. And what job in their right mind is like, sure, work for us and just leave from January to May, and then be a lightning rod, sometimes be in the media and be busy, but also work from us from June to December. And so I think this country has to have a very serious conversation about elected official pay. And that's hard because we aren't popular and no one wants to pay us, and they already think we make a ton of money. And we don't. So I think that's a policy that we need to talk about if we actually care about diversity in politics.
I think you're right. I know I've had a hard time encouraging younger women to run when I know what it was for me, and I was kind of on the end of my career when I ran for office. But I just can't even comprehend what you younger women with kids. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me. So we so appreciate what you do. It's just amazing. So there's also another bill out there that we haven't discussed in our committee that for public employees to have bargaining rights. Can you talk to that and tell us why if AAUW should be supportive or what it might mean?
Sure. So this is allowing public employees across the state. So county employees, city employees, university employees to have the ability to join a union and collectively bargain. I'm an organizer at heart. No matter what my title has been, whether it's executive director or merge or state senator or mayor pro tem, I believe my job is to organize power through people and empower people. And I think that's what collective bargaining and union work is actually having workers have the ability to collectively come together and ask for what they need to be successful. So I think organizing is a right. I support the bill. And we know that when we have unions, wages go up. We know that unions have helped close the pay gap. We know that unions have helped put more women and BIPOC folks and LGBTQ folks into positions of power. Are unions perfect? No. Do they also need to diversify? Do they also need to be more intersectional? Do they also need to put more women in power? Of course. But giving workers the ability to ask for what they need to be successful, I think is helpful. Now, there's a lot of concerns around the costs and what that'll look like. And so let's talk about how to make it doable and make it work.
Thank you. So we're about at the end of our time. Do you have some parting thoughts for us?
So first of all, I love having people come shadow me at the Capitol. And when I say shadow me, it's not just coming on the floor, but you can come to all the negotiating meetings. You can walk, I call it the lobbyist gauntlet, right? So you walk out of the lobby through the hallway and you can do that walk with me and see everyone trying to get my attention and talk to me about 1,000 different bills. You can come to coalition meetings with me. If there's a press conference that day, you can come to the press conference with me, right? So you can see what it's actually like. And so if anyone wants to come down and shadow me for a day, just reach out to me. Wednesdays and Thursdays are usually the best. More than happy to have you down. Please do get involved, practice telling your stories, tell your stories to legislators. And something two things. One, I think the most impactful time to contact a legislator is a week before a bills in committee, because that's when all the paid lobbyists are contacting you and giving you information and trying to get your commitment on a vote. And committee hearings are very important. They're not important, but contacting us a week before is when all the paid ones are. So I think it's a really important time in the decision-making process of a lawmaker. And then also when you come to a committee, committees have changed a lot, and understand there's 3 conversations happening at once, and you should participate in as many as you can. So there's the conversation that's actually happening between people on the screen or in front of you, giving you public testimony. And then there's the conversation happening on Twitter, which is also important because that's where the reporters are, but there's decision makers there too. So people are tweeting about what's happening in the committee hearing. And then there's the text messaging that's happening. So if you're part of the coalition that's working on a bill, so for example, I will be in committee, and if AAUW is supporting a bill and the opposition says something that's absurd, right? And Betty's in the room, I might text Betty and say, can you make sure the next person makes this point, right? To counter that. So you have the organizers talking with both the lobbyists and the volunteers. You have the actual conversation in the room, and you have the Twitter conversation. And I share that because you want to build power in all 3 conversations. And also, I think when you come down and it's your first committee hearing and you see us on our phones and our computers and think we're ignoring you, but really we're multitasking and trying to get the bill across the line.
Thank you. Very good advice. And we didn't have the Twitterverse when I was in the legislature, but we were beginning to text. And yeah. I remember that part.
It's a thing now for sure. So.
And what's the next new thing? Oh my goodness. But you guys are up for it. And we're so proud to have you in the legislature and all of our other legislators that visited us today. We do truly have a good General Assembly. Colorado's a great state. We're so proud that you're working for us and doing all this great work.
Thanks. One fun thing, speaking of social media. So this is something fun I'm doing this year, and I'd really appreciate you all to follow. It's on Instagram. I'll put it in the chat. I don't wear suits. I only wear dresses. There's actually a story behind that. The last day I wore a suit was in 2009. It's also the last day I took a vote I didn't want to, and it was on city council. And so I wear a different dress every day, and I put it on Instagram about why I'm wearing that dress, and I tie it to the policy I'm working on. So follow me on Instagram. It's just a fun thing. It's a video every day that's about a minute, but it's about what's happening in the Capitol that day. And I tell the story through my dresses. So something fun I do on social media.
Only a woman would think of that. Well, thank you so much, Senator Winter. This has just been a delightful time to have you here. And I think we're ready to take a break now. We'll be off for 10 minutes, and then we'll be back with our